The Southern African Regional Environmental Programme is a USAID-funded project. The project's working within the Okavango River Basin, which is a trans-boundary basin occurring across Angola, Namibia and Botswana. The Okavango is subjected to quite clear ecological changes which are defined within hydrological cycles, and so we go through very clear wet and dry cyclic patterns, and those cyclic patterns vary between 18-year wet and dry cycles, so you might have 9 years of wet and 9 years of dry, but within those peaks and troughs of climate variability, then we have additional extremely wetter or slightly drier periods of 2 years as well. So we definitely experience extreme variability within our climate, and in terms of how climate change, human-induced climate change, affects that is really, really hard to pin down.
The 2010 to 2011 rainfall season brought about quite high amounts of water into the delta, and many parts of the delta that did not have water or were not flooded previously has had water. A lot of rivers that had not flown in many years, in the last 20 to 30 years, have flown. Over the last 20 years, a lot of infrastructure that has been built in and around Maung did not take into consideration the high levels of flooding that we are now experiencing. We've also seen a lot of people who had settled along the river, who had built their residences and houses along the river, having to move out because their houses were flooded, and having to relocate to higher ground permanently and incur a great cost of building new homes. The Sankuyo community, whose river Mohofelo dried about 20 years ago and has never flown again.
This village has been here for a long time. I think over 100 years or so. And the last water that I saw myself was in 1978. It went past us towards Mababi, and ever since, no water. We are engaged in tourism. You know, tourism goes with water. So our animals are moving away from the area to areas which have water. And people come to me as their chief and say, what is happening? I have problems with answering their questions. So why is the water not coming through our channel? We have no answers.
The challenge now is for SAREP is to come up with a management plan for them that will address the water shortage situation for them, create opportunities that they can take advantage of to ensure that livelihoods, especially of those who remain in Sankuyo, actually remains viable or become viable to provide for them. And the other thing is that there's also a risk that if all the young people are moving out of Sankuyo, Sankuyo could become a ghost town.
We're trying to develop a series of early warning systems that can help land managers here deal with episodic events, try to give them an early forewarning of flood patterns within the system.
Now, the challenge in Sihitwa is that a lot of the flood resistant farms have actually been submerged underwater, and so the places where they can actually farm and grow crops, cereals, is not available anymore. These areas that are flood recession areas actually serves also as a purpose of grazing areas for cattle and for wildlife. And because now these floodplains are submerged, it means that there's no grazing even for their cattle. And what it means is that their cattle would have to go elsewhere.
When there is a grass at the lake, when the rain is raining there, is where our livestock can go there. But now it has already covered that grass.
We are not happy with the water because it's full now. It covers the grass where we are just our cattle grazing. Cattle are grazing just in the grass which is covered by water. We are not happy of that condition.
We're sitting on the end of the Great Rift Valley here, so the whole delta shifts and pivots and moves to a certain extent, and hippos open channels, and the whole dynamic suddenly changes from one year to the next. So say an area like Sahitwa has suddenly experienced a massive volume of water pushing through. Those channels have now opened up, and we can pretty much will say that the water is going to continue flowing in that direction next year. So if we got even more water that comes into the system next year, the flood situation that's happening in Sahitwa this year will probably be greater and exacerbated next year.
I believe next year, if the water can come like this, the situation, it shows us that next year we are going to get a big problem.
Shorobe is also facing the same situation as Sahitwa because their flood recession farms have also been submerged. It means they cannot do flood recession farming this year because the flood has not receded. But also even the grazing areas for their livestock is also under submerged. Shorobe is known for its basketry industry, and so a lot of their areas where they collect the palm leaves to actually do baskets is also submerged. In fact, the basketry cooperative has a palm plantation which is also submerged. So what the flood has actually done is reduced the areas where they can actually collect their palms for which they make baskets out of. SAREP is working with the basketry cooperative at Thini, at Shorobe, one to increase the skill base of making baskets, because this skill for making baskets is handed in from mother to girl child. However, because of the new education system where the girl child now spends a lot of time at school, there's not enough time for the mother to teach the girl child to actually weave baskets. So what we've done as SAREP is we've engaged master weavers from the Okavango region to come and train young girls in the Shorobe area to teach them how to weave baskets, but also to do other crafts out of the local materials that are with them.
SAREP is working really hard to try to look at livelihood diversification techniques and options. So every community is going to have a slightly different or better or optimal option than the other. So our role is to work closely with those communities and see, okay, how can we benefit more from the natural resources? Can we develop agroforestry techniques? Can we look at maybe having beehives that are collecting wild honey from that area, and those bees also act to scare away the elephants from your crops, and so act as a human-wildlife conflict mitigation act as well. By the work that SAREP does here, we try to work towards improving global climate change, but fundamentally is a means to provide an additional livelihood. So even though it has a benefit at a greater world scale, we really want to focus on the benefits that it has to the local communities.